Okay, class, so today we are going to be talking about informative speaking. This is going to be two parts. The first one, we're just going to talk about the logistics of it and the concept, the psychology behind it, and then the next part we're going to talk about different types and how to get that set up. But first off, why? Why informative speaking? Why is that an important skill to learn? Graduates from 5 different colleges were asked to rank which type of speech was most important, and number 1 by 5 different colleges was informative speaking. So, kind of important. Another study showed that 62% of the respondents said that they use informative speaking almost constantly. It doesn't matter what type of job or what type of career that you go into. You're going to have to stand before a boss or a board or something, and you're going to have to inform people on the current status of something. So informative speaking is a very important thing. Now, this is not like persuasive speaking. You do not choose a side. Informative speaking is designed just to give the knowledge or the understanding. You're not advocating for a cause. This is no bias, and that's probably going to be the hardest thing that I've noticed with high school students, is being able to just give the facts and not choose a side. So there's 3 main criteria. Number 1, is the information communicated accurately? When you're giving an informative speech, it has to be accurate. Okay, number 2, is the information communicated clearly, without bias, not skewing statistics and only giving the statistics that help what you personally think. And then number 3, is the information made meaningful and interesting? Because if it's not interesting, they're not going to listen to you. You're going to lose them 5 minutes and 3 minutes into your speech or whatever. So it has to be interesting and it has to be meaningful. So there's 4 different types of informative speeches. We can be talking about objects, processes, events, and concepts, things that aren't really tangible. So we're going to talk about these 4 types today. So number 1, objects. Okay, that's going to be places, structures, animals, people. Anything that is visible or tangible, it is in a stable form. That is going to be an object. Now, you're not going to have enough time to tell your audience every single detail. You're not going to have time whenever you're talking about an object. So you're going to have to pick. You're going to have to organize it in a certain way. There's different types. Choose a specific purpose that focuses on one aspect. An example would be the geological location of the Grand Canyon. Okay, you can't say everything about the Grand Canyon and the entire history of it because there's just not enough time. Another one could be good things to look for when buying a laptop. Another type could be you're not talking about everything that there is to say about a MacBook. And you're also not saying why MacBooks are better than PC. That's persuasive. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about these are things that every consumer should look for when buying a laptop. Another one would be, if you're going to inform the audience about Pablo Picasso, you're going to have to narrow that down. You can't talk about all art, but you can help narrow that down. And so those are all different types of informative speech topics. When you are explaining the history of an object or an innovation, you're going to want to set your speech up chronologically. Chronologically just means that you're going to go in order of history and how the events happened. You're just going and basically telling a story. The next type is if you have like the major elements of a Japanese garden or something like that. If you're working with public relations, you're going to split that up into different topics. There's different aspects when you're talking about working in public relations. You can work in news, you can work in media, you can work in social media, advertising, and there's all these different categories. And within each of those categories, you would go on to explain that. Now, when you do this, you need to limit yourself to 2 to 5 main points and balance the amount of time that you give to each of those points. Especially in this class, when you only have 3 to 5 minutes to talk, you can't have 8 main points. You're going to spend 30 seconds on each of them, and you're not going to give any of them, truly good clarification. But what you can do is you can say, now, as I go through this speech of public relations, I want you to know that there are so many different avenues. I am going to talk about 3 of them specifically and give you a little bit more details, but just know that there are so many others as well. And you can say that way you don't have to feel like the burden that you have to do justice to every single type of job that there is with public relations, because that's impossible. You will run out of time and you'll be deducted from your grade. All right, the next type is processes, okay? So with the process, you're pretty much going to set up your speech in order of the process. That's how you have to do it. So it's going to be a chronological order. But a process, the systematic series of actions that lead to a specific result or product. How something is made, how it's done, how it works. And there's two different purposes. Okay, there's 2 different agendas that you can have when you're giving an informative speech on a process. The first one is to help people understand the process better. And the goal could be just to have them understand the steps of the process or how they can relate to each other, just to have an understanding of it. The next one is people already know it, but you're telling them a better way. Explain how to perform the process better. So the goal is to learn a skill, how to make, a great example of this would be how to take a picture and make it look really professional. Show techniques and how to implement them, how to adjust different settings on your camera, what filters you can do after taking the picture. Those would all be ways of improving the process, not helping them understand the process. So if you can understand that difference, that kind of helps. With process, your best visual aid that you could do is a chart. And whether that's on a PowerPoint or it's a printout or if it's a poster board, but showing the process visually helps those visual learners. At least a chart that outlines the steps or even a chart that will list the steps will help them out a lot. And that's something that they can take notes on so they can remember. Remember that your audience will daydream because we think faster than we speak. So if you want to help keep them involved, this is a great way to do that. So when you're organizing it, there's obviously 2 different options. First one, chronologically, because we are talking about a process, so you have to go in order. And this is going to be the easiest. You were talking about step by step, but there actually is another option. Oh, but before I get to that, if you are doing a process, it's very important that, and this is where this part comes in, topical. Okay, if there are too many steps for you to fit in one chart, you can split them up topically. And you can say, okay, now in this part, here's what you're going to do. Okay, now in this part, here's what you're going to do. And that can help, 1, make your visual aid not so cluttered, and 2, it can help the audience get more details. But it must be clear and concise. It has to be very clear and easy for people to understand. Okay, the third type of informative speaking are events. 2 ways that you can organize this. Chronologically, like you're telling a story. So with the event, you would start from the beginning and you would just work your way all the way through. The next type would be topically. So if we were going to do a topical informative speech on Winter Jam, I could do a topic on the artists and how they pick, how many artists, and things like that. I could even talk about the specific artists of this year and each of them and how, what order they go in the show. I could talk about how to get your tickets. I could talk about how to get your Winter Jam Express Pass. I could talk about all the different venues that they have and their tour dates. Those are all different topical things, not necessarily chronologically laid out. You can even talk about the future with a lot of events, what future developments are coming if you're talking about something that is current. You could also talk about how Winter Jam got started. Just lots of different options there. And then the fourth type are concepts. That might be a little hard to read, but concepts, beliefs, theories, ideas, principles. They're not tangibles. They're in your head. These are best going to be set up topically. So you want to, in your introduction, you want to define the main concept And always remember to give any definitions in your introduction before you get to the body of your speech. Define the main concepts, major elements. Sometimes you can illustrate with specifics. So if I'm going to be giving a speech on Islam, one of the things that I could talk about, one of the major concepts, is when it got started, who started it. So I could talk about how it started in 600s, and it was started by Muhammad. I could talk about the teachings of the Quran. That could be another big concept. And another thing that I could talk about is the Sunnis versus the Shiites. That's another thing that I could cover. And so those are three main big concepts about Islam that I can talk about. Avoid using technical language. Define terms clearly. Okay? Use examples. Use comparisons. Things like that. But don't let people get lost because you're so tech savvy. You're not trying to impress people with how much you know. You're just trying to help make their life easier. So we're not really showing off here. And that is it for part 1 of informative speaking.